What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye at NovaCare Complex. This is an emergency episode of the No Huddle Show. The Eagles signed Boston Scott yesterday, Mike.
Whoa. Great Scott.
Great Mike joke. Okay, in reality, you guys probably know what this is about. Carson Wentz, it appears, having some back issues, some spasms or tightness or whatever you want to call it. It seems unlikely he plays on Sunday just based on the information we currently have. And there was a report from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network that there's a chance they hold him out the rest of the season. It kind of makes sense. If he's going to miss this week, they're probably going to lose, in theory. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. But this is the Eagles season in a nutshell. Like, it just seems like nothing's going right. And he didn't have a great game last week. He hasn't been that great in recent weeks. This is an issue that had been there this season. Like, he was on the injury report in the middle of the week. I think in week 7 and week 8, or week 8 and week 9 or something. 9 was the bye week, and he missed practice on that Wednesday. So this isn't like the first time. This isn't like new information necessarily. The new part is that he might miss games because of it. I mean, what was your immediate reaction when first Doug told us that, and then when the Rappaport report came out? That name does not work with a report.
Yeah, that's why they call him Rap Sheet.
Yeah, true.
I think on NFL Network. I turned to you immediately after the press conference and said, once Doug said that he was going to talk about injuries to start a press conference,
it felt like something was coming.
The NFL beat writer in me went, hopefully you heard that snap. And I was like, oh no, he's about to announce Fletcher Cox or somebody major.
Yeah.
Gonna have. I never thought it was going to be Carson. But, if the back injury has been limiting him, you can see that with his lack of mobility. That's a fair excuse, I think you could say. I think it's why he's been kind of, you remember he had a lot of success moving out of the pocket the week before against the Redskins. You wonder if maybe he re-injured that or something happened early in the Cowboys game.
I mean, he wasn't running in that Cowboys game at all.
Right, that's what my speculation would be. But again, when Doug said that, having back spasms, you've seen it with Timmy Jernigan, those can be like hamstrings where it just takes a really long time. You and I both have talked about it before. We both have a history of back injuries, and what it can be like. Your back is such a large part of, your upper body and lower body that it can impact a lot of things.
And Tom Pelissaro actually said on the air that it was a chronic back issue, which is a kind of an alarming phrase for a back injury.
Yes, especially for a guy going into the third year or the fourth year of his contract when he's able to be extended. We can talk about that contract later in the show, but it's just not ideal. I see a lot of people on Twitter talking about Carson Wentz being injury prone, or there were concerns about him being injury prone coming out of college. That is completely inaccurate. He had one major-ish injury in college, came out. He was fine his entire rookie season.
He did have a rib issue, but it was minor.
Right, it's minor. You look at the ACL,
and
that
that's
happens.
A freak thing. Yeah.
That's a freak thing, and it can happen to anyone.
So I tweeted out year by year because he's had injuries each year. I didn't mean for it. I realized what people assumed when I tweeted it. I wasn't trying to say he's injury prone. I was just literally pointing out the injuries he's had. 2015, he broke his wrist in college. 2016, he had that chest issue. Last year, the ACL, LCL, and then this year, this back thing. I understand it doesn't. He's not necessarily injury prone. It's just something I was pointing out. He has a history of injuries.
And I would say this: there's a large camp of people that are still really hooked on Nick Foles who are going to say Carson Wentz is injury prone. Nick Foles has broken his hand. He's broken his collarbone. He's had concussions. It happens. This is the NFL. This isn't flag football. Guys get injured. You know who hasn't been injured, though? Nate Sudfeld, who we'll talk about later in the show.
For sure.
But for me, this is look, the offense isn't working properly anyway. Nick Foles has this ability, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but he's got this ability to play up to his competition. When he's playing a bad team, he plays poorly. When he plays a good team, he typically stands up to the challenge. So that could be something interesting to watch. I think you also have to figure out, you're not going to bring Nick Foles back on his current set salary for next year. It's not going to happen. But maybe do you want him as your long-term backup instead of Nate Sudfeld? You've got to figure that out. You also want to shop him because if he gets a really nice contract, you want to display him because if he gets a really nice contract, you get a really nice compensatory pick. So, the Eagles' playoff hopes are actually very realistic in that you can expect the Vikings and the Panthers probably to lose one more game the way they've looked over the next 3 games, and you could consider the Eagles going 3-0 maybe, or potentially 2-1 and the other 2 teams falling off the map. That said, as I'm rambling a little bit, Nick Foles has proven that he can win games for you, big games. This is the reason why you have him.
Yeah, I mean, my immediate reaction was just, of course, Nick Foles is going to be starting the final 3 games as they're trying to go on a playoff push. Like, it's just setting itself up for another, storybook end to the season where he beats the Rams. They go 3-0. They make the playoffs. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to storm through the playoffs, but it's just like Nick Foles. We've talked about him in the past, more towards the beginning of the season. Like, he's always been the extreme kind of guy where these next 3 games he might earn himself a lot of money, or by putting him out there, the Eagles might be hurting his value if he goes out there and looks like he did the first 2 weeks, which is pretty average.
Right, and I think the first 2 weeks weren't very. I mean,
it didn't help his
value. So really, the only way there's only up to go. I mean,
he's in the middle. He probably hurt his value in the sense of where he was coming from as a Super Bowl MVP. Mm-hmm. But
his value was never going to be higher coming off.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, that first game he started. He wasn't very good, right? Last year.
Against that he started?
That he started.
He was fantastic against the Giants. It was the next game against the Cowboys.
Okay, well, the Giants are bad. He's going against the first game. Like, I know you said he plays up the competition. The Rams are good. Like,
right.
I mean, I know their defense has holes, but they still have Aaron Donald, who gets sacks every week, and he's on a tear right now. He's on a mission to break a record.
The good news is, if they do turn to the RPO game, the Rams...
Which they haven't really done as much this season.
Right.
Yeah.
The Rams' defense is extremely aggressive. I know from covering Dante Fowler for several years that he bites a lot. And so that could work into the Eagles' favor as far as the RPO game. I mean, the Rams will know it's coming
as long as Foles is making things happen.
Right.
Like if he's playing less like he did the first 2 weeks and more like he's shown in the past he's capable of.
And so for me, this is an opportunity for the Eagles to kind of recharge their offense. Nick Foles led the huddle in practice today. And what I thought was interesting was I overheard him say something about Carson. I didn't hear the entire conversation. But when he broke the huddle, a teammate goes, "Nick, you got it." Guys believe in Nick Foles.
No doubt about it.
I mean, they believe in Carson Wentz too, but
I mean, you saw it last year. They rallied around him. Like, that was the whole thing. I know this is a different team, but there's a lot of the same guys are here.
This is going to benefit 2 people that are not named Nick Foles. Alshon Jeffrey and I think Golden Tate.
Yeah.
Because the RPO game will be perfect for Golden Tate. I also think it'll benefit Nelson Aguilar to some extent. With how they're looking at him as a deep threat. But Alshon Jeffrey's a guy who hasn't been targeted regularly. Nick Foles will target him.
I mean, it was pretty clear if you even just watch Alshon in the playoffs, him and Foles just... Your eyes tell the story. He has a better chemistry with Alshon Jeffrey than Carson Wentz does.
Well, and the thing is, too, is you mentioned Nick Foles not playing very well in the first 2 games. He didn't have
Alshon wasn't there, yeah.
Alshon wasn't there.
They didn't have Golden Tate.
And...
Dallas Goedert was still adjusting the NFL.
The running backs were banged up.
Yeah.
Clement and AJ
Josh Adams wasn't even on the roster.
Right. I think Josh Adams healthy has played better than Jay Ajayi did in the first couple of games, minus the touchdown.
Foles is certainly coming back to a more, vast arsenal of weapons.
Yeah, I think they were still trying to figure out left guard. Jason Peters. He wasn't playing very well.
Shoot, Wisniewski might have to start this week, and he was starting in that week 1. So the offensive line is going to look the exact same as when he started the season.
Well, at least there's continuity, right? But let's focus more on Carson, though, because...
Yeah, the impact of this.
Carson's played 11 games, and the offense hasn't played all that well. They are 5-6 in the games that Carson has played.
Yep. So Nick Foles has a better winning percentage this season.
Yes.
I understand it's just 2 games. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Carson has upped his completion percentage.
A lot. Almost 10%.
I think he has. We've harped on his accuracy, but he has been more accurate. Not just talking completion percentage. There have been throws that he's made that he has never made.
He's simultaneously been more accurate and less accurate, actually, I would say.
Yeah, I think he's more inconsistent, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
So he'll go through stretches where he's a people don't want to say it, but he's also a streaky quarterback.
Yeah.
He's not high variance.
I mean, his playing style is kind of makes that so. He's an improvisational type of guy, and that's not always going to work.
Well, if the Eagles are saying to themselves, the offense isn't really working very well, Wentz is not feeling up to par, maybe we should just look for his long-term future. He'll be 2 years removed from an ACL surgery by mid-season next year. He'll have his feet under him. Let's let him regroup. That's not necessarily a bad decision. They are still alive in the playoffs, so you don't know what type of message that sends unless you have Nick Foles. Because Nick Foles is a guy, he's the Super Bowl MVP, he's done all this stuff. People roll their eyes about Nick Foles all the time when I talk about him. But the truth is, if you played with him up until the Super Bowl run and you've seen what he's been able to do at times, he is extremely high variance. The bad is really bad, but the good is really good. You can trust him to go do it. I mean, this is a situation where you need a very high-level offense, and Nick Foles is capable of leading a high-level offense when he's on the good streaks. So, I mean, you're taking a gamble here, but realistically, you shouldn't make the playoffs. This Eagles team should...
No, it has no business being in the race. The fact that the Vikings and Panthers are like, hey, you guys can stay in the playoff race. Like, the Vikings just fired John DeFilippo, which we probably would have talked about more extensively today, but that's like...
Yeah, I wrote that.
That's
I'm
like
excited about that.
News.
Bam.
I mean, and the Panthers, like, have lost how many games in a row now?
I think it's 3. But they lost to the Browns, so that's all that really matters.
Yeah, but the point being, like, the Eagles are in this because the other teams are more dysfunctional than them right now.
Yeah, and you look at the remaining schedule for the Vikings, they have the Dolphins, I believe the Lions, and then the Bears. The Bears are going to be trying to play for a 2 seed.
They play the Bears this week, I believe, yeah.
No, they play the Dolphins on Saturday.
Did I get it mixed up? Yeah.
Yeah, you did. So, it's okay. All right.
But, I mean, the Panthers play the Saints twice, and the Saints are playing for home field advantage right now because they're tied with the Rams.
And they're going to be trying to hold on to that 1 seed or potentially a 2 seed.
So, if the Eagles were to beat the Rams today, that almost gives like the Saints. Not today, Sunday. That gives the
the Saints are actually have the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
So but it does give them more incentive.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, I have a scenario to play out for you. I'm going to give you what I think about the scenario, and then you tell me what you think about that. Nick Foles goes out on Sunday. He's bad Nick Foles. Mm-hmm. He throws 2 interceptions. The Eagles get killed. I would turn to Nate Sudfeld the last 2 games.
Yes.
I think at that point, I mean, of course, it still depends on what happens with the Panthers and Vikings, but the odds of them making the playoffs at that point, especially if you get killed and you're just not feeling very good about those. I know the Eagles maybe don't think like this, but Nick Foles that would have already hurt his value, and the Eagles are trying to get a compensatory pick for him. Like, that's just the reality. And let me finish this. I always cut you off, I know. But Nate Sudfeld, I think it's time to see if he has the goods, if he's as good as they talk about behind the scenes. Give these 2 games to both, you're both showing him off for other teams who might be interested in trading a high draft pick for him, or you're figuring out if he's good enough to invest in as a backup for Carson Wentz, because clearly Wentz hasn't made it through a full season since his rookie year now. So,
my turn.
You're good.
Okay, so here's why I have pause about that. So, like you said, it depends on what happens in the Panthers and Vikings games. I think the Panthers and the Vikings are going to lose this weekend. As a matter of fact, if I were a betting man, I would bet that they lose probably pretty big.
For the sake of the scenario, let's say they both win.
Okay. For the sake of the scenario, they both win.
So the Eagles technically are still in it, but they don't have the tiebreakers. They'd have to win out, and the other 2 teams would have to lose out.
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah.
Correct. The only concern I would have is you're going to play a Houston Texans team with a front 7 that's unlike any other outside of maybe the Rams.
Yeah, Clowney, Watt.
And so you're kind of setting Sudfeld up to fail in a lot of ways. I would much rather... I think he starts Week 17 if you're not in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think that's a guarantee. The issue for me is you're going to have him face a team that is going to probably want to close out strong, so they might be able to overtake the Patriots for that 2nd seed. I think you can't just turn to Sudfeld and lose you're not going to lose the locker room, but you can't just give up. There's way too many older players on this team for you to just be like, yeah, let's throw the kid out there. So I would consider it. I don't think I would do it. Now, I'll throw this back at you. The Eagles lose, but they lose because the defense just can't handle the Rams. Nick completes 65% of his passes.
Like a typical Nick Foles game.
Yeah, throws for 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. You're still and then the Panthers and the Vikings both lose. Are you starting Nate Sudfeld the next?
No, not at that point. I think a lot of it depends on what Nick Foles shows this week.
Yeah, I think this game is about
how I feel about it. At least the
right.
Eagles probably will keep Foles in for at least the next 2 weeks. If they're still in the playoff race in Week 17, he'd obviously play in Week 17. I mean, maybe not obviously if he's not playing well the next 2 weeks. I don't know, but it feels like these 3 games are probably Nick Foles's if they stay in the race. If they don't, I think it would almost be doing a disservice if they don't even play Nate Sudfeld in Week 17.
Well, when you look at Nate Sudfeld's outlook, right, he's going to be a restricted free agent. They're probably going to have to, if they want to keep him, they're
second round tender probably.
Yeah, I could see them signing him to an extension. It seems like that would be something they'd be interested in. That said, if you're Nate Sudfeld's people, do you really want him signing a low bar extension without showing what he can do?
Exactly.
You can talk about the Week 17 game from last year where he was playing actual starters and looked okay. I think people
he completed his passes, but he didn't really get yards or anything. Yeah.
Right. I don't think you can really get a really good scope of that. If you're going to have him out there with starters with Jason Peters out there, maybe or at least the majority.
I know it was the preseason, but he did look fantastic in the preseason.
He did. He
at
did.
times at least. Up and down, but there were times where you watch in the throws he was making, and you're like, he looks like a player.
I mean, I think I'll put this on record. I think it'd be idiotic to cut Nick Foles and let Nate Sudfeld walk. That would
they
be
can't
the
do both
dumbest
of
thing
those.
ever.
Yeah, they can't.
You've kept a third quarterback for 2 years. That guy has to be the heir apparent. I also have talked to people in the league that think Nate Sudfeld could be a big deal eventually. He's got potential. I loved him at the East-West Shrine game. I thought he was the best quarterback there by a mile. Then again, if you've ever been to the East-West Shrine game, quarterback.
Yeah.
But I think Nate is a guy that is thought of really well in this organization. I think the locker room really likes him. He does really good stuff. He did really good stuff on the scout team during the playoffs and stuff like that.
He might be the most athletic of the 3 quarterbacks too, honestly, too, the way he moves around.
Yeah, I would say so.
At least when they're all healthy. I mean, I know Wentz isn't healthy right now. But.
I mean, Nick's physically imposing, but Nate is
he moves pretty well, yeah.
Yeah, look, I would be excited to watch Nate Sudfeld. If they were not in the playoffs right now, Nate Sudfeld would be out
if they were already eliminated, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you've got this prime opportunity. You don't want to be one of those teams that won the Super Bowl, and then got deemed paper champions the next year. I think Doug's way too competitive for that. I think Mike Rowe has a lot on the line. I think Howie Roseman has a lot on the line as a former executive of the year. If you've seen who's won executive of the year over the last several years, it hasn't really turned out well for them down the road. And I think if they can just build some momentum, maybe make the playoffs, not necessarily win a game, I think that gives you a lot of momentum heading into the offseason where you're going to rearrange a lot of stuff, but the basic structure of what you're doing is working. I also think the next 3 weeks are going to be huge for Mike Groh. He doesn't call the plays and he essentially tutors the offense into what Doug Peterson wants, is my perception, which is basically what Frank Reich did, but he did it very well. If they can turn this offense around under Nick Foles, Mike Groh can say, well, wait a minute, maybe it's that I came into the season thinking we were going to run more RPOs, we were going to do certain things, this is what works, do you mind if, everybody, you brought up John DeFilippo, he was known for his red zone play calling.
And they were number 1, I think, in the league last year in red zone.
Yeah, guess what the Vikings are, 23rd. The Eagles are actually 18th. So, again, I also think this is a great opportunity for Press Taylor. I mean,
show what he's made of.
Yeah, you saw what John DeFilippo and Frank Reich were able to do, and I think they built their resumes based on the work they did with Nick Foles, not with Carson Wentz necessarily.
Everybody kind of almost expected that out of Wentz, whereas Foles, you have to get ready. He had him. People underrate Foles, number 1. I don't think he played in the preseason last year because he was hurt.
Right,
and then that means he didn't take any first team reps the entire season.
Right,
up until after that Rams game. So he had 3 games to get get going. Like, they knew they were going to be in the playoffs at that point, which helped, I think. Like, if they were fighting for the playoffs, it's a little different. It might have been harder to get him ready. But he hadn't started all year. He'd barely played in any. I don't even know if he had played in any games because Wentz had played pretty much every snap, I believe, although they were blowing out some teams, so I'm not 100% on that. But, yeah, I mean, they got him ready, and then they got him firing on all cylinders by the Vikings game. So
yeah, I mean, I think Press Taylor kind of has that John DeFilippo vibe.
And he was around last year, too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Nick Foles had a lot going against him in those first couple of games. I mean, the defense was banged up already. There was a lot going on. So let's see what can happen in this week. Let's not rush to. I'm not going to rush to judgment on, hey, this is terrible for the Eagles season, because I've seen what can happen when Carson Wentz goes down and Nick Foles steps in. That said, for the long-term outlook of Carson Wentz, do you label him as injury prone? I don't think so. I think, this is just one of those. They're snake bitten this year. I mean, this is really, like, I've never seen injuries like this.
This feels more precautionary than anything this Wentz one.
Right. I would agree. I also think Jernigan's been a lot of precautionary stuff. I think
Jordan Hicks
too,
because he's had a lot of calf issues in the past.
Right. There are guys. I mean, Darren Sproles. There have been a lot of guys. Yeah. Well, now that he's got Darren Sproles in week 2, which he didn't have before.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, and they lost that game.
Yeah, they lost that game. That's true.
And Sproles wasn't a part of the run. He wasn't playing this late last year.
Yeah, so, again, I think this is... And Nick Foles and Darren Sproles have a very good relationship. If you remember, there was that Chris Baker hit, like, Nick Foles' first tenure here, where Chris Baker just threw him to the ground. Nick Foles was like, "That's my teammate." And he got, like, all, like... everybody made a big deal out of it. Again, I think Nick can handle this.
I mean, that's for, at least in terms of the mental capacity to handle it, like, there's no question about it.
Right.
He might be the best suited to handle it out of anybody.
Yeah, and he's the best backup in the league, and nobody can dispute that based on his credentials and what he's done. It's going to be really tough to outscore and outpace the Rams. That said, if Jared Goff is pressured the way I think the Eagles are going to pressure him, he is not going to have a very good day. Jared Goff does not do well against pressure, while the Rams' offensive line is pretty good. Okay, whatever. I don't think they're that great. I think that Brandon Graham could do a pretty good job against Andrew Whitworth. I just think this is setting up to be a really intriguing matchup. Whether they win or not, it's going to definitely be a must-see Sunday night game.
Yeah, Sunday night.
So, we'll monitor these injuries. I want to touch on a couple of other injuries. Avonte Maddox was back at practice on Wednesday. That's a really good sign. I think he could really help, especially when you're going up against a high-powered offense like the Rams. I think he will be more of an attribute more of an asset, than Corey Graham back there at free safety if he's in that position, or at nickel in place of Crayvon LeBlanc, who I actually think's played very well. He had that big give up to Cole Beasley in Week 14, but other than that, he's played very well. Rasul Douglas, you feel really good about. Sidney Jones probably isn't going to play. I don't know what they're going to do there unless they put Avonte Maddox outside, which would be very interesting, against Brandon Cooks, actually. I think that would be a very interesting matchup. And then...
Also, Corey Clement out for the year. That's happened since
Corey Clement, Josh Sweat both out. Jalen Mills got put on IR after our show last week.
Their IR roster would beat, like, the Cardinals. If he was lined up there, IR roster.
It's crazy. And then the guys that weren't at practice, Jernigan, Bennett. Bennett missed all of last week, pretty much, and the week before, and he still played. I think he'll be fine. He's going to be huge in that game. Jernigan's getting better, listed as day-to-day. Maddox listed as day-to-day. Hicks listed as day-to-day, but he was not out at practice today. Sidney Jones was not at practice. He's also listed as day-to-day. And then Isaac Seumalo, what was his injury?
Pectoral.
Okay, he was not at practice either. So, I mean, they're not, like... They're not in great shape, but they're not in terrible shape either. I don't think Jordan.
I mean, the scarier thing than Nick Foles going against the Rams is the Rams' offense going against the Eagles' defense.
Correct, and that's going to be rough.
I mean, you haven't even mentioned Todd Gurley. Like they have to defend Todd Gurley,
right? Who is coming off a bad game and is going to be run very angry.
He's going to be pretty angry. I mean, the team is. You don't want to play a team like that coming off a loss,
at
home.
What I will say is this: I don't think the Rams are as good as their record is. I think they're a team that when they face adversity, they can't really handle it. Sean McVay is brilliant and all that stuff, But they're a team that has to play with a lead because their defense isn't very good. If the Eagles can somehow find a way to take advantage of the Rams' defense, I think we could see a nice little shootout here, and the Eagles might have a shot.
All right. We'll do our full preview later in the week. We just wanted to get this one out there for you guys, talk a little about the Wentz news. I'm sure there'll be updates throughout the week, and we'll touch on that on our preview pod. Thanks for listening. Leave us some comments, some reviews. We're on all the podcast apps. Follow us on Twitter, and thanks for listening.